The throne is not a seat. It is a tomb. You sit upon it as if you are bound to it by invisible chains, the gold filigree pressing coldly against your palms, the weight of the crown burrowing into your skull until it feels less like a symbol of power and more like an iron shackle. The vast hall stretches before you, cavernous and hollow, its marble floors polished to a cruel brightness that reflects torchlight but no warmth. You watch the courtiers bow. Their movements are smooth and perfect, drilled into them by years of ceremony. But you see the truth in the way their eyes flicker down and away, unable to meet yours for longer than a heartbeat. You see the fear they dare not name. They whisper when they think you cannot hear, behind fans of silk and painted masks of civility. You can almost feel their words scraping against your back like knives. They call you cursed. They call you barren in spirit, even if not in flesh. They say the gods have abandoned you because you have buried every child you ever brought into the world. The first was barely alive long enough to be named. A daughter with hair like threads of gold, gone before the sun rose on her third day. You remember how the midwives carried her away, wrapped in linen, as if you were not her mother but merely a vessel that had already served its purpose. The second was different. A boy. He laughed when he heard your voice, tiny fists clutching at your gown. His eyes wide with the kind of innocence that does not belong in this world. You remember how warm he felt against you, how desperately you clung to him, knowing, without knowing why, that you were holding something fleeting. One night he coughed. By dawn, his body was still. The priests told you it was fever. You told yourself the same because to believe otherwise would have broken you. But your third child was the one who shattered what was left of your faith in fate. He was strong, stubborn, even. He would crawl across the nursery floors with fierce determination. You allowed yourself to imagine him grown, wearing the crown that had weighed on your own head since you were younger than he was. And then the palace stairs claimed him. One moment there was laughter, the next only a scream and the sound of bones striking stone. And then came the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. By the seventh, you no longer bothered to ask the priests to pray. Your husband, king in name but not in spirit, was no comfort. He spoke of heirs as though they were livestock. He buried your children with the same ceremony he would give a dead hound. His eyes, once soft, became cold as he withdrew further into his council chambers and hunting lodges, leaving you to grieve alone. Yet you never broke. You attended court the day after each burial, your spine straight, your lips unmoving, your gaze like steel. They whispered you were stone-hearted, but the truth was simpler. You understood that to survive you had to become stone. Queens who weep are torn apart by wolves in human skin. You had no intention of bleeding for them. And then came the letter. It was left upon your desk in your private chambers. No servant admitted to placing it there. There was no seal, no signature. Only a thin scrap of parchment, the ink so black it seemed to drink the light from the room. 5 words. They were never accidents, Majesty. At first you stared at it, numb. Your mind rejected it. Your children were victims of cruel chance, nothing more. That was the story you had been forced to swallow, again and again, until it had calcified in your bones. But that night you did not sleep. You paced your chamber, each step ringing sharply against the stone floor. You thought of the servants who vanished after each death. The nurse who left the palace and was never seen again. The physician who one day failed to report for duty. His quarters stripped bare as though he had never existed. The midwife who fell ill and died within a week of delivering your third child. Pieces that had never fit together suddenly formed a shape too hideous to look at directly. When dawn bled across the sky, you rose from your chair. You rang the silver bell that summoned the captain of the guard, a man whose loyalty had been tested in blood and fire. When he entered, he knelt, and in a voice that was not quite your own, low and sharp as a blade drawn in the dark, you said only this: "Find them." He asked nothing. He did not question. He bowed, and in that bow you saw something in his eyes, a glimmer of understanding. When the door closed behind him, you stood alone in the silence of your chamber, clutching the letter in your hand until the parchment tore beneath your fingers. And for the first time since your womb became a graveyard, you felt something that was not grief. It was older, sharper. It burned like iron drawn from the forge. It was rage. The palace changes after the letter. Not outwardly. Not in the way the courtiers see it, with their dances and feasts and hollow rituals of loyalty. But beneath the surface, where eyes are sharper and footsteps quieter. You no longer see marble and gold. You see walls that listen. You see tapestries hiding more than cold stone. You see corridors like veins, carrying whispers from one chamber to the next. The captain of the guard becomes your shadow. He is a man of few words, but in his silence there is something solid, unshakable. Each night you summon him to your private chamber, and each night he kneels and reports. At first, there is nothing. A misplaced key, a servant lingering too long outside the council chambers, a clerk who burns ledgers instead of storing them. Harmless details until they begin to form a pattern. The palace has its own skeleton, and someone has been breaking and rearranging its bones for years. It begins with the kitchens. One night, the captain brings you a vial, no larger than your thumb, sealed with black wax. He found it hidden behind a loose stone in the larder. Its contents, when tested on a hound, kill it in less than an hour. You ask him, how many such vials could be hidden in this palace? He does not answer. The next day, you attend the council meeting. The chamber is full of silk and polished rings, their laughter grating like the creak of old wood. You watch them through lowered lashes. The High Chancellor, with his smile sharp enough to cut glass. The Dowager Duchess, ancient and unmoving, her eyes as pale and clouded as winter skies. And the Archbishop, who clutches his jeweled cross as though it alone grants him power to speak in the name of heaven. They speak of taxes and grain levies. You hear none of it. You watch their hands. You watch their mouths. You imagine the ink on their ledgers hiding blood. That night, another letter comes. It is left on your pillow this time, though your doors were locked and your guards posted outside. No seal. No signature. Only a line written in the same hand as the first. It was not only your children. The words burn. They do not frighten you. They hollow you out. The captain brings you to the archives beneath the palace. It is a place few dare to enter. A maze of dust and parchment where the air smells of old ink and forgotten history. By torchlight, you pull records that no queen before you has bothered to read. Births, deaths, lineages. You see the same story repeated, over and over, reaching back farther than your grandmother's time. An heir born, an heir dead before the age of 10, a cousin raised to inherit instead, a pattern disguised by ritual mourning and careful silence. Your hands shake as you trace the names. Dozens of royal children, gone before they could grow. And yet the crown endured. You speak aloud, your voice sounding strange in the dead air. They do not kill the throne, they prune it. The captain's jaw tightens. He says nothing, but you see the truth in his eyes. The council has not merely governed the realm, they have farmed it, trimming away any monarch who grows too strong, any heir who might one day rule without their hand upon the reins. Your children were not victims of chance. They were a warning. And now you begin to understand why the palace has always felt more like a prison than a court. From that night onward, you change. You dine with your enemies. You smile at them. You host feasts so lavish the bards sing of them, while your guards quietly mark which servants pour the wine and who tastes it first. You touch goblets to your lips but never drink. You feign weariness at council meetings, only to spend every night poring over hidden ledgers and stolen letters brought to you by spies who do not exist on any record. One by one, the captain brings you their secrets. The High Chancellor owns lands far greater than his station allows. The Archbishop receives shipments of unmarked crates through the crypts beneath the cathedral. The Dowager Duchess, older than any woman has a right to be, keeps an apothecary who once served in the royal nursery, whose hands have delivered more children to graves than to cradles. And then the deaths begin. A servant is found floating in the palace fountain, his mouth stuffed with rags. A clerk who once forged records for the council vanishes, leaving only a trail of blood smeared across his chamber door. A midwife, one of those who attended the birth of your fourth child, is discovered in the woods, her body bound and left for the crows. The court calls it coincidence. They always call it coincidence. But you know better. This is not chaos. This is cleansing. Someone else is hunting, and they are hunting the same prey you are. One night, as rain lashes the windows of your chamber, a third letter arrives. This time it is pinned to the canopy of your bed, a dagger driven through its center. The words are fewer now. Strike first. You sit in silence for a long time. You hold the letter until the ink smudges beneath your fingers. Then, for the first time in years, you laugh. It is not a kind laugh. The captain enters, silent and expectant, and you do not hesitate. You give him 3 words: lock the gates, and the poison court begins to rot from within. The gates close at dusk. Ironbound, sealed by command, they shut with the sound of judgment, and for the first time in decades, no one leaves the palace. The guards line the walls in silence, their armor glinting like the teeth of some vast and patient beast. Within these walls, silk and gold become useless. Titles and prayers hold no power. The court laughs that night. They think it is another of your whims, a temporary gesture of mourning, or perhaps paranoia from a grieving queen. They drink their wine, they whisper their lies, and they do not yet understand that they have already been buried. You stand at the window of your chamber and watch the torches flicker across the courtyard. You think of your children, not as they were in life, but as you last saw them, one by one, carried away in linen shrouds. You imagine the council's hands upon those shrouds. You imagine their fingers, stained with quiet murder, holding your world together only so they could feed upon it. But you do not weep. You do not rage. You only plan. The feast, the summons goes out at dawn. A banquet, a celebration to honor the loyalty of your council and the noble families who serve the throne. It is the first feast you have held in months. They arrive at sunset, dressed in jewels and smug certainty. The High Chancellor enters first, his smile as polished as the rings on his fingers. The Dowager Duchess is carried in her litter, her bones wrapped in velvet, her face powdered so thickly it is more mask than flesh. The Archbishop blesses the hall in the name of heaven, though even heaven seems reluctant to follow him here. They sit at your table. They drink from your cups. They do not notice how your goblet remains full, untouched. The music begins, soft at first, a gentle lull meant to soothe them into complacency. They toast your health, your strength, your composure in the face of tragedy. You raise your glass and smile. You watch them drink. And as you watch, you imagine their laughter silenced. When the last toast is made, you rise. The hall stills. My lords, you say, your voice steady, sharp enough to slice the hush in two. My ladies, you have served the crown well. Some bow, some smirk. None see the guards closing the doors behind them, bolting them shut with a sound that echoes like the fall of a blade. The reckoning, it begins with the ledgers. Your captain drags them forth, one by one, and lays them on the table. Documents sealed by royal authority, authority that was never yours but theirs. You speak their crimes aloud. Stolen tithes hidden under false accounts. Bribes to the apothecaries who failed to save royal children. Orders written in secret, signed by hands now trembling at your table. You hold up the first vial of poison, the one found in the kitchens. This, you say, is the true wine of my palace. It is the taste my children drank in their cradles. I wonder, you let the words drip like venom. How many of you know its flavor? The High Chancellor begins to protest. His words are smooth, but his face is pale. He has spent a lifetime ruling in shadows, but tonight the shadows have fled. You do not argue with him. You nod to the captain. The guards move like wolves unleashed. Chains rattle. The Archbishop tries to flee. He does not make it past the second pillar before steel catches his robes. The Dowager Duchess does not fight at all. She only stares at you, her milky eyes wide. Not with fear, but with something worse. Resignation. Child, she rasps, and her voice is older than stone. You think this will end it? You think this throne is yours? For a heartbeat, the hall holds its breath. Then you step closer, kneel so your face is inches from hers, and whisper, "No, I will make it mine." And for the first time, the dowager looks afraid. The purge, what follows, is not swift. You do not simply execute them. No, death would be too merciful. One by one, they are dragged down into the dungeons, their silken robes staining with dirt and blood. They scream, they bargain, they curse your name, but you listen to none of it. Instead, you visit them. Every night, you descend into the cold stone belly of the palace, past the rusted gates where torches burn low and the air smells of damp rot. You walk the rows of cells like a priest in a temple of penance, and you watch them break. The High Chancellor, once untouchable, claws at the bars until his fingers bleed. The Archbishop, stripped of his vestments, mutters prayers that no god seems willing to hear. The Dowager Duchess refuses to eat, her body wasting until she is little more than bone draped in rags. And still it is not enough, because there are others. Servants who carried poisoned cups, scribes who altered the ledgers, midwives who placed dead children into your arms and whispered that it was the will of heaven. You summon them one by one into the throne room. You do not need to ask questions. You already know the answers. Some you banish, some you hang, some you leave for the dungeons. The palace runs red with quiet justice. The truth beneath the truth. It is in the last weeks of the purge that you find it. Deep beneath the palace, in a forgotten crypt sealed with rusted chains, you discover a chamber lined with tiny coffins. Each bears the royal sigil. Each holds the bones of a child. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. And in the center of the room, atop a pedestal of black stone, you find a book bound in cracked leather. Its pages are filled with names, dates, and a single phrase written over and over again. For the strength of the crown, the blood must not root too deeply. This was not merely murder. It was tradition. The council was only the latest hand holding the knife. The true enemy was older than them, older than you. And as you stand in the crypt, surrounded by the bones of children who should have been kings and queens, you make a vow so sharp it could split the heavens. You will burn this tradition out of the world. You will salt the earth where it grew. You will never bear another heir, not until the last hand that shaped this curse is severed. If the throne must be ruled by a queen with no children, then so be it. Let the old order choke on its own ashes. When you ascend from the crypt, dawn is breaking. The palace is silent. And for the first time in your reign, you are not the mourning queen. You are not their victim. You are their reckoning. The palace is quiet. It has been quiet for weeks now. No laughter echoes in the gilded corridors. No music flows from the banquet halls. Even the whispers, the endless, poisonous whispers, are gone. Those who once ruled in shadows hang from the palace walls, their corpses left as warnings. The vultures circle but dare not descend. The peasants in the streets call you by a new name, the Widow Queen. Not for your husband, who has long retreated to his hunting lodges in fear of your gaze, but for the kingdom itself, for you have buried the old order like a bride laying her first lover to rest. And yet it is not enough. You know now what they were. The council was not the beginning. They were only the latest link in a chain that stretches back farther than memory, an ancient covenant carved in blood and silence, a throne that never grows too strong, a crown that devours its own. The book you found in the crypt burns in your mind, its words etched into your thoughts like a brand. The phrase repeats itself every night when you close your eyes. For the strength of the crown, the blood must not root too deeply. They have been pruning kings and queens for centuries, stunting every bloodline, ensuring that no dynasty could rule unbroken. Your children were not the first, they were only the latest harvest. And so, you resolve to do what none before you dared. You will not be pruned. You will burn the garden. The clean sin, it begins in the cities nearest the capital. You summon every noble family whose blood has ever touched the council chambers. You summon the midwives, the apothecaries, the scribes whose quills carved false histories. One by one, they kneel before you in the great hall, trembling under your gaze. Some swear innocence. Some weep. Some beg for mercy. You grant none. The executions are not swift. They are public. For too long, murder was hidden in the nursery, cloaked in silk and silence. Now the kingdom must see. The High Chancellor's estate is stripped bare and burned. The Archbishop's cathedral is locked, its bells silenced forever. The Dowager Duchess dies in her dungeon, her title erased from every record. The people watch and whisper, but they do not rise against you. Fear binds them faster than loyalty ever could. They call you cruel. They call you mad. But they obey, because you are no longer merely a queen. You are the storm they have prayed never to see. The war of silence, your purge, spreads outward, beyond the capital, beyond the heart of the realm. You send your guard into the provinces, and wherever they march, old families vanish. Castles that stood for centuries are torn down stone by stone. You hunt the order like a plague, and you find it everywhere, in the hidden cellars of merchant houses, in the cloisters of monasteries, in the ledgers of treasurers who die before they can explain their ink-stained secrets. The kingdom bleeds, and yet, for the first time in living memory, the throne does not. No heirs die. No infants are poisoned in their cradles. No more little coffins are carried to the crypts beneath the palace. You have broken their cycle. But in breaking it, you have become something else, something older than mercy, something colder than grief. The people no longer call you the Widow Queen. Now they call you the Black Crown. The final letter, it comes on a night of thunder, just as the first snow begins to fall. Your guards do not see who delivers it. No door was opened, no window disturbed. Yet the letter lies upon your throne, as if it had been waiting for you. The seal is not wax. It is blood, pressed into a shape you do not recognize. Inside, there are only 3 words: we are not finished. You stare at it until the candlelight gutters and dies. And then, for the first time in months, you smile. Because you are no longer the queen who sits and waits for grief to strike. You are not the mother who wept over empty cradles. You are not the victim the order once thought they could bury. You are the hunter. And if they want war, you will give them a war that will be remembered until history itself turns to ash. The next morning, you wear the black crown not as a burden but as a weapon. And the kingdom bows not in love, not in loyalty, but in fear. And fear is enough.